Just let me know when you're ready and I'll. Noise. Let's see who it is. I'll start and let me see if it's on. Yeah, Susha. I don't know. Ready?
I'm ready for you. Yeah.
All right, since we do have a quorum, I'm going to start the meeting so we are on time for our viewers at home. So please rise. Start with pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the, hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to our, is this on? Hey everyone, I'd like to welcome you to our first public hearing. I'd also like to remind you there is another one on Tuesday at the same time, and you can also meet with our administration and superintendent at the Delaware Farmers Market on next Wednesday and the Wednesday after from 11 to 1. All right, and now thank you and welcome, and I'm going to turn the presentation over on our reopening plan as far as we have gotten over to our superintendent, Kelly Zimmer.
Okay, the first thing I'm going to do for you tonight is to model. When we do reopen, for our students who rejoin us in person, we will follow a protocol where masks will be required every day and throughout the building. That includes transitions, that includes any movement throughout the building. Thank you so much. The one time when we will be providing the state-required mask breaks will be when students are in classrooms which are currently staged to be completely socially distanced. And once we can ensure that our students are seated in a socially distanced fashion, then they will be permitted to remove their masks. So since I'm currently socially distanced from Beth and from the nearest folks around me, I will remove my mask so you can hear me a little more clearly. One question that came up that I'm going to throw out right away on the topic of masks in classrooms is that if I am a teacher and I feel that I have, a reason, whether it's a medical vulnerability or otherwise, can I ask that the students keep their masks on? Absolutely, we can. We are first and foremost looking out for the safety of not only our students, but our faculty and staff. And we'll capitalize on these opportunities that may or may not come up as teachable moments. So that would be a great example of a teachable moment of respecting individual differences and not ostracizing people for personal choices that they're making. And along those lines, if a child does not wish to remove their mask, they will not be forced to do so either. So after we've modeled that, I will begin with our presentation tonight. We are going to try to provide this presentation within the next half hour or so. There's also a frequently asked questions document that you may have received on the way in. If your questions are not answered either through the presentation or through the FAQ document, then we're going to engage in about an hour of open questions and answers. After that point, then we will end our board meeting and we will reconvene in a similar fashion on Tuesday, where the exact same information will be shared again, with opportunity for questions and answers. And as Beth had mentioned, we are available for open Q&A at the Farmers Market from 11 to 1 for the next 2 Wednesdays. So with that, I want to point out first and foremost that our reopening committee designed kind of what our commitments are. So these are many, many difficult decisions that we're engaging in. We are trying to meet the needs of so many of our learners. And what will we ground ourselves in? What are those commitments? And so our committee decided that we will be dedicated. We will be academically focused. We will be caring. We will remain student-centered. And we will be determined to meet the needs of many of our learners as we possibly can. So our commitment to you, and I can't cheat and see this far, so I'm going to turn around just a little bit here. And we just want you to please understand that this is a decision that we take very seriously. When I say that our administrators wake up in the middle of the night thinking about this, that it's very true. But just so you understand that we do know and recognize the trust that you place in us when you're deciding to send your child here or even remotely. The trust that you place in us to continue to provide a quality education that is continuous and consistent with what you expect when you send your child to Delaware Academy. So since we last met, we've received tons of feedback. So the last time that we presented this, we shared a model that we were planning on including in our reopening plan that we submitted to New York State. We did meet all the requirements in that plan. We were not one of the districts that the state identified to send that back or that we needed to revamp any part of that. However, it's as we promised, it's a fluid plan, and since that time we've received a lot of feedback, and truly from all ends of the spectrum. From families who have concerns and really want that remote-only model, to families who are ready to have their kids back and feel that we're safe, and encourage us to please push and stretch our capacity to see how can we possibly bring back as many learners as we safely can within, of course, the guidelines that have not changed from the State Education Department or the Department of Health. And so we have worked tirelessly to try to do that. So what you'll hear tonight are kind of the results of where we currently stand. We are aiming to make a final decision and commitment to a model by next Wednesday. That's a loose deadline, but we're hoping to do that so that you as families can stick and move forward and plan all the personal decisions that you need to make, and so our teachers can have the time to do the same. Just an updated timeline. We were successful in submitting our plan to the New York State Education Department. Governor Cuomo's announcement that came last Friday said that schools are permitted to open, but did not include much beyond that, but that we can move forward with our reopening. Since that time, we are continuing to develop our instructional models. We put out a second parent-guardian survey. If you haven't had an opportunity to complete that yet, please do. We have hard copies in the lobby, and we also have a computer that's open if you want to jump right on before you leave. The reason that we went out with a second survey was to really help us drill down some definitive numbers for the families who can commit at this point to either remote or an in-person model. And that helps us to continue in our planning, because if we know a certain percentage of our students need to be remote and are intending to be remote, then we know the remaining number that we're working with to determine to what extent we need to develop either a hybrid or a full-time in-person model. So again, I bring up this slide just to show that this is not an easy linear process. It's truly an interdependent design process where we have requirements and mandates in a number of different areas that we have to consider simultaneously in developing this plan. Among those are some non-negotiables. We have some universal requirements. I talked about the mask use a little bit. We also have to engage in daily health screenings. That's different than testing. I know we've received some questions about, are we going to be testing our students either preemptively or if we suspect that they have COVID? Our school district will not be conducting testing because we are not medically permitted to do that. However, in the plan, there are guidelines for the steps that we will take should we suspect that a child or a staff member may be exhibiting symptoms of COVID. And that is done hand in hand with the Delaware County Department of Health. We continue to develop our plans for both in-person and remote learning, and with a focus on those prior standards and still meeting the diverse needs of many of our learners. So, in July, these are some of the things that the community survey told us and some assumptions upon which we've continued to develop our plans. There was a clear ask for family choice. That's not a requirement from the state, but we are permitted to do so. And DEA is moving forward with deciding to allow our families to have a choice between remote models and degrees of in-person models. That really resonated from many, many families. One of those choices many people were asking for was to develop a remote-only learning model. We are moving forward with providing that as an option for our families. Out of that survey also arose many challenges that would be associated if we did a hybrid model. childcare, parents going back to work, continuity of learning based on our experience from last spring. So those concerns have not gone on deaf ears, nor have they gone unnoticed. There has been a plea for greater alignment instructionally within that remote model. Also, what really resonated were a bunch of students especially who said, I want to be back all day. I want to have my senior year where I can be back in school as much as I can. So since that time, a few new developments. As I mentioned before, yes, we are moving forward with a concept of family choice. We have engaged in the development of a remote-only model where we are looking for a blend of both synchronous and asynchronous learning in that remote-only model. What we mean by that is the intention would be, and this is not developed in detail, but the intention would be to provide our parents with a daily schedule that would align with the experience of the child who is attending in school that day. So you would have an opportunity, if this fit your family's needs and constellation at home, that you could jump in and perhaps view some classes as they're happening live. But we're also looking to either pre-record or record those live classes so that families also have the flexibility to dip into a library on our website to extract lessons by grade level or content area, so that you do have that flexibility later on to engage in that lesson. Please know that regardless, we will be moving forward in our curriculum and in our content to try to maintain pacing and to hit those priority standards. So we cannot be in a position where your child is waiting all week to catch up on a week's worth of lessons, because it will continue to progress. We are also addressing that alignment piece in terms of focusing a hybrid model that prioritizes as much as we can in-person learning at school for those who choose that model, and with the primary focus on the students who have the greatest degree of learning needs. And that's not just our desire, that has come out of the guidance of the New York State Education Department, that we must prioritize our students with special needs if we can bring them in person as much as possible. And also focusing on our youngest learners and really providing a robust tier 1, meaning all students simultaneously getting that early intervention, early literacy, early numeracy skills. We also added to our reopening committee. We have added 2 additional parents who are not employed by the district, and we also have a high school student who has joined us. We've also developed our frequently asked questions document that you see. We are also, after having a long meeting with teachers yesterday, we'll be developing an analogous form for our teachers and staff. We have established our public forums, one of which is tonight, next is Tuesday. We have spent time staging and setting up classrooms so that we can really understand the limits of our capacity, not only in classrooms, but in our quote-unquote overflow spaces. So in our gyms, in our libraries, and in other spaces like that. And today we also did a trial run of our technology in those classrooms. Will we truly have the ability to share learning in a synchronous fashion simultaneously where we're able to do that, so we can troubleshoot audio and video and those types of things that came out as concerns from last spring. And we're continuing to evaluate the limits of our capacity. When I say capacity, I don't mean just physical capacity of our buildings, but also our limits in terms of staffing and the financial ramifications that come with, including considering adding staffing or not to really stretch our capacity. So some continued unknowns for us. We have to be cognizant of and try to anticipate our substitute teacher needs. We know that we may have a situation where teachers may need to quarantine. A quarantine means somebody's going to be out of our building potentially for 2 weeks, and we have to provide a substitute teacher in that case. To continue to ensure that we're moving forward with the delivery of our content and our curriculum. We also have contractual obligations. We are blessed here with a wonderful, wonderful teaching staff. I can't tell you how many teachers have said to us, I'll do what it takes. Let me know what you need. But at the same time, we do need to be, we cannot take advantage of our teachers, and we do need to be aware of those contractual obligations for those planning and prep periods and for lunch. And those planning and prep periods will be so, so important, because not only are we asking teachers to prepare for typical content, but to prepare to deliver that content in a number of new and different ways. So we're really trying to preserve that as much as we can for our teachers. Currently, our response rate on the updated survey is at about 50%. So I'm going to show a slide in a minute that just has some kind of numbers on it to give you an idea. And we are continuing to need to move forward with our planning, assuming that the unanswered responses could theoretically be here. We can't assume that they're going to be remote. So by the end of this week, for those families who have not responded yet, starting on Monday, you'll be getting phone calls home, just to say, what are you thinking? Again, we're not pressuring you for a commitment at this point, because we still have many unanswered questions, and we understand that it's hard for a family to commit without some questions answered. But it's going to be important as we move forward in that planning. So if someone gets a phone call home, don't take it as that we're harping on you. We're just trying to make informed decisions for our school. So this gets an idea of where we currently stand in terms of our, I apologize, I just need to grab this so I can see a bit more, of where we stand right now regarding our survey. So this gives you an idea of, at each grade level, the number of students who have said, I'm interested in an in-person model, whether that's full day or part day, and what percentage of our total student population that represents. How many students at each grade level are indicating that they want to remain home for a remote-only model? We've been going on the assumption of roughly 20% based on that initial survey. And so now, as you can see, we're starting to really drill down a little bit more. And we're truly ranging, depending on grade level, from anywhere from 5% to upwards of well, you see 27% there at the fourth grade level. And then you can see the percentage that we have not received a response yet against the number of total students in that grade level. So as you can quickly see, when we, I have really pushed our administrators and our reopening committee to think of, based on this and what we know, is there any possible way, where can we really consider having full classes where we can open our doors and say, anyone who wants to come back can come back? Based on many of the challenges that we've been facing associated with that. And so just to highlight, for example, we talked about, I think, third grade here as an example. We have a total of 50 students in third grade. So the way that we've been setting up the classrooms really requires us to cut our typical class size just about in half in order to socially distance the seats that are in any given classroom. So where we would have a class of 50 students, and let's say theoretically, that would normally divide into 2 or 3 classrooms. Now we're looking to double that. So where can we do that? Whether it's reassigning staff, identifying overflow spaces, recapturing spaces in both buildings as instructional. Where can we do that? And while assuming that the non-responders are going to be here too. So that just kind of gives an example of the kind of numbers that we're currently dealing with, and just reinforcing that, I've been pushing, you can ask Mrs. Mabel and Mrs. Robbins right up until 5 o'clock this afternoon, what can we commit to for our community tonight? So as much as I would love to stand up here and say we've got it all solved, we don't, but we're going to share with you how close we've been able to get. So at this point, I can confidently say that we don't have the ability to bring 100% of our students who have indicated that they want to be here every day across all grade levels. It will not be feasible, but we're getting close in some areas. So here just kind of briefly describes a lot of what we already know in terms of this in-person/hybrid model, which will be one of the choices. That will be 100% daily attendance, and it tries to achieve and get close to students who can be here 3 or more days per week. However, we are committing to our students with special needs to be here every single day, regardless of grade level. and are also our students who attend BOCES, specifically those CTE programs. Those will be back full-time as well, because BOCES is able to provide in-person instruction for their families who want to participate in that. When we develop our students into cohorts to determine what days they would come on, we have committed to keeping our families together. So all the children in your family will come on the same days. I know there were rumors out there that we're doing it by building or by grade level. We've designed that by family to ease that burden. We will be required to revert completely to a remote teaching model based on the New York State Department of Health, should our infection rates in Delaware County equal or exceed 9%. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Mabel to come up for a minute and share with you what the plan is tentatively where we currently stand in the elementary school.
Hi, everyone. So I need to turn and look at this too, so please excuse my back. I don't mean to have my back to people, but we are looking at bringing all students K2 back into the building. I do not have that totally set in stone yet, I will be honest. I have it working. I'm very close. I am hopeful to meet the deadline of next Wednesday, but I'm not there quite yet. One teacher at each of our grade levels is going to serve as a remote learning specialist. That person will be in charge of the students who are choosing to stay home and will also be in charge of those students who have to be on the hybrid model and are home for that day of learning. Synchronous and live stream instruction for health, art, music, and library is our goal. Our push-in lessons for our counselor are going to be in person. As a matter of fact, he's helping me with a lot of the scheduling, and he's already inserted himself into the what is called the specials schedule. He's going to be in each classroom every week. Class sizes are about 10 to 12. There's a couple bigger spaces that I can fit 15 people in, but most of them are 10 to 12 in the elementary building. There will be some reassigning of some teachers if we bring back all of the students, K2. And we are expanding classes into that indoor recess area. It used to be 2 classrooms. For those of you who were here a long time ago, you know that. So it was 2 classrooms. I think we've taken back some of the indoor recess room that you're thinking. It's only 2 right now. The area I have is only 2 classrooms. So, and then the health room, the art and music room are definitely being looked at as well. So that will be necessary to bring it in. If it's a grade 3 through 5 student, we're looking at the cohort model where they'll be in person either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they'll be home the opposite days. I think I've done those as well. So that's where we're thinking in the elementary.
Hello, everyone. And I too am going to look at my board or my slide. So we decided in the middle school, high school that we would also try to follow the same schedule, bringing families in on Monday, Tuesday, every other Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday, every other Wednesday, for the in-person and the remote. The students with special needs and any student who attends BOCES, as Mrs. Zimmerman said, can go every day. They have a footprint that's large enough, so that would be, we have students in the 11th grade that go in the morning and seniors who go in the afternoon. So those students would be attending every single day. Grade 7 is kind of an anomaly this year. We only have 38 students in that classroom at this time, or in that whole grade. And so I'm looking at, and hopefully making the decision by next Wednesday, that possibly at least the 7th grade could come every day. There's small enough numbers, and we have enough teachers in that content, in those content areas. So that is something that, you know, we are just deciding to maximize capacity for that 7th grade. Synchronous and asynchronous instruction, all of our teachers this summer have been taking different PDs that have been provided to us, fortunately, through BOCES, and they're learning an awful lot about blended learning platforms, which basically teach them how to do that flip teaching, getting all of their lessons onto Google Slides and onto some kind of an online platform. So basically, everything that we say to the teachers now is, you know, you need to make sure that this can be taught online as well as in the classroom. So the hope is that our teachers in general, we're going to allow some, you know, some freedom and some professional courtesy as to how they're going to do that. But basically, they're going to spend an awful lot of time helping the student know that that online instruction is kind of, you know, the meat of what they do. And then when they do have the beauty of seeing that student face to face, those times are going to be used for the clarification, obviously the social, emotional, and personal contact, because we all know that caring adults are very important, especially, you know, with our middle school and high school, that gets even more important sometimes. And then also the science labs, because at this point, State Ed has not told us that, you know, regents or requirements for graduation, 22 credits, 3 electives, needing the science, the math, the social studies, and the English regents, it's all still required. So we're going forward, as we would any other year, that we need to meet all of those requirements for our students and, you know, in order to graduate. So basically, you know, with the middle school and the high school, we really started with the seniors as far as making sure that we were meeting all of the requirements that they're going to need to be able to graduate in June, and kind of work down from there as far as our content area, you know, teachers and remembering that they're certified in those content areas. So it's been quite a puzzle, and we have wonderful counselors that have been putting that all together. We're trying to also remember that DA is all about academic excellence, and the amazing thing about DA is that we offer such a wide variety for our students. So we did not want to lose the opportunity for our students to take AP classes and college credit courses, and we also have the CTEP program. So we kept all of that into the, you know, in trying to figure this puzzle out, we made sure that we kept that. And so I'm feeling very confident at this point that we have maximized capacity. We're looking at using every inch of space in this larger building, obviously. Things like the middle school cafeteria, our gymnasiums will, you know, probably be classrooms. We have the ability for the technology. And so once we have all of those numbers back and we know for sure what students have chosen the all remote situation, we'll be able to figure out, you know, more clearly and specifically about those students that we need to teach here in person. Stuff.
Thank you, Mrs. Mabel, Mrs. Robbins. So this just kind of gives another illustration of what I was talking about earlier in terms of how we're setting up and arranging our physical spaces. We will be requiring daily temperature checks and screenings. How that is proposed to look currently for our families at home is all of our students are currently in Power School, and that's our student information system. Our elementary students are all being loaded into Power School. So as a family at home, if you're able to access online, and get into PowerSchool using your child's credentials, you will be asked to go in and to complete a brief screening form each day. I don't need to know what your child's temperature was, but we do need to know that your child did not have a fever that exceeded 100 degrees. So that will be one of the basic 4 questions on that screening form. What that will do is simultaneously load into our system so that we can identify people in particular, our high school principals, our high school and elementary principal, for example, who can look at that before kids even arrive here and quickly identify what students a health screening was not submitted for, so then we can engage in that temperature check when the child does arrive at school. Our faculty and staff will be required to do the same. We talked about the mask use. I put a line on here for hallway transitions, locker use. We will be, if we're able to access lockers, and we haven't looked at it in detail yet, but that will need to be staggered and restricted as to how frequently you can do that. We considered eliminating the use of lockers altogether and allowing our students to carry backpacks, as many other districts are doing. But we're also concerned with the risk that could face if we have all of our backpacks in a pile in a classroom. So we're thinking through all of these details to really provide an experience for our students that mirrors as close as possible what it would normally be like, because there would be nothing normal about this for our students. We will be trying to keep our windows open as much as possible. I know there have been a lot of questions about ventilation, and outdoor education is being encouraged. When we have a teacher that can take a class outdoors, we have a huge, beautiful campus with plenty of space to be outside. That'll be more complicated as the snow starts to fly, but certainly when we can take advantage of that, teachers will be encouraged to do so. Transportation. We will be transporting all of our students who require transportation. That was another question on our survey, because that will help to inform how many runs we need to establish and how many students we can load on those buses. Right now, our preliminary practice will be that if students are in the same family, they can be seated together on the bus. Everybody will be required to wear a mask on the bus for the entire ride. If a student gets onto the bus and does not have a mask, we will have extra masks on our buses available for students to take and use throughout the day at school. And then if they are not in the same family, we'll be seating 1 student per seat. A little more about the remote learning model, that our teachers will be engaging firsthand in developing the curriculum that goes online. Will they be taking advantage of other online platforms? Possibly, things like Castle Learning, IXL is another one that we talked about, iReady potentially. So there will be a blend of that, but it will be designed by our certified teachers. As I mentioned before at the outset, we'll be looking to establish those daily schedules for families at home to follow if that's something that meets your needs. We will be having also ways to track daily attendance, whether students are in person or remote. That continues to be a state requirement. We've also talked a lot about transition supports for students and parents. Particularly our kindergarten families who have been asking, am I going to get a chance to bring my child in and see their classroom? What's orientation going to look like? Realistically, we're going to need an orientation for everybody, for all of our students. So we're talking about where it makes sense to do that virtually and where it's safe, how we can do that by bringing students in to actually see their classroom space. We're trying to be very empathic and very sensitive to all the emotional needs and transition needs that students are going to face, regardless of what grade level they're in. So I'm going to ask Mr. Schultz to come up just for a minute and talk about the financial impact for our reopening plan.
Good evening. One of the big questions that I was asked right away was from some parents, if we went to a remote learning platform, how does that affect state aid? We receive a little over $9 million in state aid every year. This year we were slated to get an increase. They took that increase back, and that happened all across the state, so our aid is flat for this year. But really, there's not a huge effect in regards to that. What happens is we have what's called foundation aid, which makes up about at least 75% of that probably, which is based upon attendance levels in prior years. So they don't change that formula. What they do is they give a percentage on top of that foundation aid each year. So that's untouched at this time. We receive building aid, which is associated with past building projects. So really the only thing that's affected by it are what's called categorical aids. If somebody decides to go fully remote, it doesn't affect the enrollment. They're still enrolled at DA, so they're still our students, so we still get aid for them. If a parent decides to go to an older traditional homeschool model and pull away from the district and use their own resources as far as teaching, then that would affect us, but I don't see that affecting us at any point, to be honest. It's not going to push the needle that much. As I stated in budget hearings and things like that back in March and April and May, June, we talked about this look back. With revenues at the state level being as dismal as they are at this point and forecasted to go on for probably about 4 more years, they're saying about a $60 billion hit to New York State alone. So what the governor's looking to do, if there's no additional stimulus package from the federal government, they will do a 20% cut on state aid payments. And when we built our budget, we forecasted those state aid payments to be possibly in September and another one in December or January. So we did budget accordingly to assist with that. If it becomes any more than that, then we could see some pretty big hits to our current year budget. With reopening, there are quite a few additional expenses. I'll start off by just saying PPE equipment alone. The requirements of what we have to furnish and supply to ensure that our students and staff are safe is amounted to, right now as of today, about $33,000. That includes masks, signage, it includes barriers, polycarbonate. We can't use plexiglass here because it is not fire rated. So they have a new polycarbonate glass that we've had to try to find, and we've been able to locate those. So we'll have that located in certain areas throughout the district, mainly support staff in offices, main offices when you walk in. Screening management system, we were talking about the screening management system with staff, also with students. Like Mrs. Zimmerman was saying, you have to do that every day. If we find staff that have not completed that, they have to complete it before they get in. Or we have to administer a self-screening test when they arrive. One of the big things, I would say technology-related needs, we've looked at IXL for the upper secondary classes. We had it more in the primary. We just started looking at that yesterday. Looking at the software again for the screening was additional cost. We're also looking at additional costs for any technology-related items. The only problem right now is, as with PPE, technology-related items are very tough to get. There's quite a big turnaround, anywhere from 2 weeks to probably 3 months. As far as technology, I think we're pretty well set. And we went through that list this morning. Software we can still add on, and that won't take much of a turnaround. The biggest thing I will say is on that last slide is training is critical at this point. And so what we're doing, usually we have a superintendent conference day before the start of the school year. Welcome back. This is what it's going to be like. It's just like last year. It's not like that this year. So what we're focusing on is not just doing a simple training, but doing training across the board. So each department will have their own separate training. We want to make sure that the bus drivers know what the teachers are doing. The teachers know how the bus drivers are, their morning starts with their students. Everyone is on the same page. That's critical. So we're looking at spending a lot more money this year in the first couple of weeks of opening or before we open to make sure that all our staff are trained properly across the board and that they feel comfortable coming back. Reopening, some more financial impacts. Custodial staff, we're putting together a model now of what we need to do as far as proper cleaning each day. It's going to be a little different than what we're normally used to. Again, that's cleaning supplies, additional cleaning supplies. We may have to bring additional substitutes in the cleaning and the custodial staff to help assist with nightly cleaning. We'll do daily cleaning also. We have to hit high impact areas or high traffic areas a lot more throughout the day. And then any financial implications of adding any additional staff. Like I said, the model we're working at right now is just to see how we can get all of our staff and how we can get them in classrooms and working, and like we talk about it every day, all hands on deck. If there are additional staff that have to be hired, it's a pretty big cost. A full-time teacher right now, average cost with benefits is about $80,000. Support staff probably more around $50,000. So each FTE or full-time equivalent or full-time person you add to that has a pretty big impact to the budget.
So as much as we'd love to say the easy answer is just to hire more teachers, for all those reasons, it's just not fiscally responsible to do so. Next steps, obviously, are to finalize and to communicate this plan, to continue to work with our faculty and staff to drill down all of the nitty-gritty details of how we're going to be developing models of instruction. Always encouraging people to stay solution focused. It's easy to kind of get in that downward spiral of admiring the program and why we can't do things and how challenging things are. But we're staying solution focused. I just said to Mrs. Mabel today that after having gone through this year, our teachers are going to discover ways to deliver instruction and ways to think outside the box like they never have before. So when we have the ability to be back here completely normal, it won't be normal. It's going to be that much better just because of the shared experience. So we are staying solution focused and continuing to want to really be the best at what we're doing. Of course, I've been really trying hard to maintain communication. I was called out the other day because with my weekly updates that are going to our community on the website, they're going at the same time to our teachers. And I always try to make sure that our teachers and staff and our board are aware before big communications are going out, but information and turnover is coming around so quickly. I want everybody to have it as soon as we're able to digest and turn that around. So we will make a commitment to continue to do that. So knowing that we are continually, looking and developing this, and may still yet be developing it beyond what we shared with you tonight. Based on everything that you heard tonight and based on the frequently asked questions document, at this point, we'd like to reserve about the next hour for outstanding questions that you might still have. Or if you're not sure or need a clarifying question on something, please ask. I also do have a list of questions right here that were submitted online for our families at home that are watching. And so I think that it might make the most sense if we kind of bounce back and forth. If we take a question from the audience, and then I take a minute to hit some questions in here. I will note that the questions that we did receive from people who are at home, some of them are repetitive, so I'm not going to hit on every single one, especially if there's a question that I think that we've already answered, just in the fairness of time. And I will ask that if for our audience members who are here when you're asking a question, please be respectful of your time and giving, really an equitable opportunity for everybody who's here with us to be able to have an opportunity to ask questions. I also may yield the floor to one of our administrators who might have more information than I do. So I can start with one right here to kind of break the ice. Can there be more fluidity or flexibility in a student's choice of remote versus in-person learning? For example, can my child only attend in person when lab sessions are taught? The answer is respectfully no, simply because there are so many moving pieces to this, that once students are assigned a schedule, it will be important that they remain to that schedule, because we need to be able to predict on any given day that we have the capacity to safely keep the students here who we are expecting to be here. I'll take a question from the audience. Amy?
My question is, what's going to happen with art, music, chorus, band, and gym?
So the question is, what's going to happen with art, music, chorus, band, and gym? So we have had departmental meetings specifically with those departments. We know that at DA, we take pride in providing a really well-rounded education that includes educating the whole child. So we are working on creative ways not to eliminate any of those. And that includes those specials pushing in and prioritizing at the elementary level. At the high school level, we've talked about band and chorus. The requirement at New York State is that for those activities, students have to be socially distanced, not at 6 feet, but at 12 feet. So just because of the exertion of breathing that's associated with those activities. So we played around with an idea like, do we do it here in the auditorium? But any of us, and I was a band geek, so I know that the trumpets have the spit valves and my clarinet always was dripping on the bottom. It's just not feasible to get that all over our cloth auditorium chairs. But some creative things that we have tossed around ideas about, we're having smaller specialized like quartets or specialized ensembles. Trying to move forward still with our lesson program. So students still have an opportunity to proceed within their music programs. Similar ideas are being tossed around in chorus, but we don't have definitive answers beyond that yet, but we do fully recognize the importance of all of those co-curricular areas. What about sports seasons? Will BOCES reopen? So someone tried to get a twofer in here for me. Sports seasons, we are following the guidance from the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. And as those changes are coming about, we have no choice but to follow them. I will tell you that there are a group of superintendents who, in conjunction with the MAC, we're talking just this morning about, all right, if we can't have these sanctioned sports, what's our capacity to move forward with intramurals? Can we do things locally to still give our students that athletic experience? I don't have the answer to that yet, but these are other creative ways that are being discussed in terms of sports. Certainly, if we're permitted to move forward, of course we want to be able to have sports for our students. There's also a related question, if my student is completely remote, can they still participate in sports? The answer is yes. We want to open our doors as much as we can and even provide our students who are at home with still that social experience, that athletic experience that comes with playing sports. We may, for our students who are remote only, need to rely on parents, however, for transportation. We don't have that solved yet, just because of all the back and forth that we'll already be having with our transportation. And yes, BOCES is reopening. Thank you, Beth, as I described earlier. Yes?
Follow-up question to that first question.
Sure.
About students coming and going in and out of the program. Once parents make the decision for either remote or the hybrid model, just so I understand, they're not allowed to change that for the whole school year, or will it be evaluated in December time during the break? How's that?
That's a great question, and that was not the intent of my response, so thank you for clarifying. So the question was, when I responded that we can't have that flexibility, kind of the a la carte for in-person versus remote, does that mean that once we make a decision to a model, we're stuck with that through the entire year? Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So we have developed a 10-week look-back periods. So every 10 weeks, we're going to pause. We're going to internally evaluate the success of these models and what challenges are surfacing now that we've been doing it for a while. And there will be an opportunity for parents to make a request of a change in model. So if you were completely remote for 10 weeks and your child is begging you to come back because they see their friends coming back or what have you, or you may have a personal family decision that you feel more comfortable now that you've had a chance to see what's going on, then you can make a request to shift to the hybrid model. However, I say request because we need the ability to evaluate, again, our capacity at that point and where we stand to see if we can honor everybody who wants to come back. It'll be easier to go the other way, theoretically, if you wanted to shift from that in-person to a completely remote platform. But we will be establishing 10-week look-back periods for that. Yes?
So there's a chance if you're remote only to start, that you may be stuck with that whole school year depending on class sizes.
So the clarification, if you're remote only to start, is there a chance I could be stuck with that if the class sizes don't permit a re-entry? Yes, there's a chance. All right, let me hit another online one here. How will the school ensure that the kids stay safe, wearing their masks, no hugging, high fives, engaging in routine hand washing, which may not have been strictly enforced back in February or March as this was all coming out. It's not an easy task for the younger students. We talk about this every day. We talk about our high school students wanting to come back and be back to normal, you know, and give high fives, and kids are, we had it just the other day when we were at the farmer's market. We had an elementary student who was so excited to see Mrs. Mabel that she just couldn't help herself and came up and hugged her. And it was equally as sad to see the reaction that, oh my goodness, we can't do that, right? That breaks my heart. And so that could happen. I can't stand here and guarantee that these kind of things aren't going to happen. But what I will tell you is we're going to be spending a significant amount of time talking to all of our students about expectations and rules and regulations and how we need to engage to make this successful and to make sure that we're continuing to keep our students safe and we don't see an increased infection rate. How will we enforce that? Routine reminders. If we do have students who refuse to comply with those rules, then there will be phone calls home. And there will be a phone call home the first time your student refuses to wear a mask, because we cannot jeopardize the safety of our students and our staff. And if if that conversation with the family, if that doesn't remediate itself, we have the beauty of a remote-only learning platform. Another audience question, yes?
Well, still on the same issue of the masks and everything, is there gonna be, like, are there teachers that have medical issues that are not gonna be wearing masks, or are parents gonna be informed that they have a teacher that's not gonna be wearing?
Okay. Yep. So the question is, I'm sorry, can you repeat it one more time for me?
Are there gonna be teachers that have medical issues that won't be wearing masks, and will the parents be informed? Will teachers be teaching in a mask, or will they be removing it while they teach?
So if there is a teacher who has a medical reason they cannot wear a mask, are they going to be standing up there with my child and teaching with or without a mask? So some of the language in the state ed guidance document in Department of Health refers to medically vulnerable populations and the obligation for a school district to consider accommodations when we are presented, with a written request from a faculty or staff member that they require special accommodations based on medical need. It's anticipated that they may need additional PPE equipment. I don't have an immediate response for that one. If there is a reason that a teacher cannot physically wear a mask due to, a medical need, then we would need to look within our guidelines for, is there another way that they can have personal protective equipment to ensure that our students remain safe? Or do we need to be looking at remote options for that individual? So the answer is yes, we will be looking at, accommodations for those that are medically necessary, but none that will jeopardize the health and safety of our students. Let me hit a question online here. The question is, what will the school day look like? Will there be outside recess? I think we described in pretty explicit detail what a school day might look like. And yes, there will absolutely be opportunities to get outside and have recess. School cleaning and sanitation protocols, what would they look like? I think Mr. Schultz hit that a little bit on his slides. And then another real quick hitter, will there be testing protocols for teachers and students? We talked about the screening versus testing in the district. Yes?
In regards to OCs and CTEP students that are going to be leaving our campus to attend the BOCES campus or SUNY Delaware, what have the conversations been with those institutions or campuses based upon safety protocols?
So the question is for students who are attending any placements out of district where they may have the propensity to be floating in and out during the day. Specifically our students who are half-day CTE who go to BOCES. And also our students in CTEP who are engaging at SUNY Delhi. So I have had many conversations with the interim provost over at SUNY Delhi and with Mr. Dewey, who is the district superintendent for DCMO BOCES. And both of those institutions also have very similar screening protocols, mechanisms, and routines for identification, isolation, all of the same safety protocols. And so they are asking the same question of us.
And theoretically, if a student arrives to us in the morning, they have been through our screening and are safe to be here. They will be transported by our district transportation in a controlled environment, and they will be entering a controlled environment without having had access technically to kind of that outside world. Now, certainly when they are at BOCES, they'll be interacting with students from other school districts. And that, theoretically might introduce some risk. However, I'm confident that the levels and the safety protocols that are in place in those BOCES classrooms meet that litmus test for then a student who, actually they wouldn't be returning if they start there in the morning. It would just be one transition during the day. So we are in concert with any of the other institutions that our students may be attending to make sure that our safety protocols are aligned. Let's hit another one online. Will there be a way to request certain families go to school on the same days for babysitting reasons? That's a great question. And while we are super sensitive and understanding of that need, it's going to become a challenge to make sure that these cohorts truly are balanced. We've already determined that regardless of what cohort your child lands in, the number of student attendance days is almost identical. And we have to prioritize based on family. Now, if you receive information on your child's assignment and you have a significant disruption or significant need and a compelling reason why you may have a request to change, you can certainly call our main offices to make that request. But please know, for the most part, we've developed these, very scientifically to maintain that reason. And I don't anticipate we'd be able to accommodate every single request, for babysitting purposes, or because my child's best friend is in the other cohort, or I know this family and I feel safe with this family, and I only want to send my child to school if I know they can be with this group who I know who are safe. Although as a mom, I understand all those requests. As an institution, we don't have a way to guarantee that for everybody. Audience. I got one way in the back first.
I just follow up on that and clarify. So are you saying that one slide that based on capacity with these states or faculty, that the majority of grades cannot possibly do one cohort based on numbers so far or once we see final numbers? And will that be evaluated after 2 weeks as well?
Okay, I'll use this to kind of illustrate. So students will be assigned in most grade levels to one of two cohorts. So two cohorts. So we're dividing the student body in half to oversimplify. And so your child will either be assigned and come every Monday and Tuesday in person. And then every Thursday and Friday they'll be remote. Wednesday is the kind of that flex day. So depending on the week, it will be every other Wednesday. So over 2 weeks, your child will be in person a total of 10 days. Am I not understanding the question?
I'm saying, do you see any way, once the numbers are still fluid, and you're still testing out spaces, do you see any possibility for just a single cohort that's less confusing possibly at all? Or are you saying based on what you've done research so far that it's going to be possible to have one group come in, say, 4 days a week?
So we will consistently reevaluate the models. So the question is, based on our numbers as they continue to come in, is there a possibility that we can have more students come in person, or perhaps one cohort coming on more days? I apologize for misunderstanding the first time. And so we will always be reevaluating that, consistent with any new information that comes from the state level too. I mean, they may come in and say that we can increase our capacity, and of course we want to be able to do that. Will we be making those changes every single week? We can't, because of the complications that come with just developing an overall master schedule. But will we be looking at, as things shift on at minimal on a 10-week increment? Get another one here online, and then I know I had a question right here in the front. How are the bathrooms going to be cleaned after each use? Who's wiping down tables and doorknobs after each use? Great questions. The bathrooms will be in the larger areas, like at the high school right now. The bathrooms will be every other, either urinal or every other sink will be marked off, just much like you do when you go into a public facility. Whether that be, at the store or rest stops along the thruway, that type of thing. We've probably already experienced that. That'll be the same here. The bathrooms will not be cleaned after every single use. We do not have the ability to keep up with that. And, science has demonstrated that the likelihood of transmission from, a toilet or other, touch spaces is less likely than what's to be transmitted should it be airborne. So we will be reinforcing proper hand hygiene at the elementary level. The bathrooms are in the classrooms. Our teachers will have much greater oversight, as far as that goes. That's the extent of the degree to which we've explored the response to that, unless anyone can think of more.
We will increase the frequency of cleaning those high traffic areas, and more than what we would normally do in any given year. So after, doorknob every use, still, again, that's an impossible thing for us to be able to monitor and to accomplish. But I would say that we're probably going to be going into those bathrooms every 30 minutes, hitting those doorknobs, and, on a regular routine, and just any kind of services that would be touched. Desks will be taken care of. Most students are going to be in classrooms, for a longer period of time. But we will disinfect those desks every time that they are used and reused.
So to summarize, Mr. Schultz was just clarifying that although I said we're not going to be able to clean the bathroom after every single use, every time a student goes in there, we are increasing the frequency with which we're doing the overall cleaning throughout the school day and certainly every evening. There's a question up here.
You had said before, possibly having one of the teachers for the online only. But my question is, are you going to have to be able at the evening time too? Parents won't have to be at work all day because we'll have questions like, we didn't learn the corona, how many months? So we're back to teachers to meet them. How can you make that happen so that it's available late in the evening to be able to go over that?
So the question is if my child is a remote-only learner and I'm a mom that works all day, and while I might have supervision for my child during the day, I'm going to be teaching them at night. Will I have access to a teacher, a live teacher in the evening, consistent with a model that the teacher was assigned as the remote learning? I don't know. I need to be sensitive to the fact that our teachers are restricted by contract to be working a certain number of hours during the day. So I cannot require a teacher to be responsible for instruction during the school day and then continue to be available in the evening. That's my initial response. That being said, as the models develop, might we find ways to make that achievable? We may, and the fact you brought up that question, we'll look into that, even deeper.
But it's not just for the remote only, it's even for the kids that go to school during the day. Because parents,
Right.
I think what she's trying to ask is the day of the week that we send our child to school, that they're Monday, Tuesday, they're home Thursday, Friday, but we will work Thursday. We get home at 5 o'clock. And then we're gonna have to go to the lesson. Will there be someone available for us to contact you and ask what exactly are we doing? I think that's what my question is.
Right. So will a teacher be accessible in the evening, when we have questions? So my initial response is, we can send emails, certainly, leave messages. I don't know yet, but now that you've brought that up, that's something that we can discuss further, as a need. So thank you for bringing that up.
Just to assist in clarifying that, I think the recorded lessons are supposed to be available 24/7, right?
The recorded lessons would be available 24/7, yes,
If you're
yes,
home that day, parents would be able to watch that in the evening.
that's correct. All right, let me see if I can hit another online one. There was a question about, can DA still have a terrific music and arts program? We talked about that a little bit. Amy asked that question for us. There are a few questions on air filtration, air circulation. How is air filtration being addressed? Are any HEPA filters being installed? I know I have another question asking about proper ventilation due to prolonged occupancy of indoor spaces. What is the district doing to assure the buildings have ventilation systems? I'm going to actually step aside and ask Mr. Schultz to take this question because he has been assisting me to a great degree on the facilities end of things.
Just so you know, the district is, before I worked for schools, I really never realized how much ventilation is actually performed in basically every square foot of this whole building. There's a state mandate that you have to, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers, but you have to transfer so much air within a classroom and transfer it and replace it with fresh air from outside. So every classroom has that ability and it's constantly moving. We have plenty of rooftop units on top of the roofs in both buildings that basically, they're not air conditioning units, they're just air filtration units. And they are constantly swapping air out with fresh air from outside. There's been some talk about additional filters. The filtration system we have here is adequate. We've had safety look at it multiple times. There's some talk about additional filters. We've been told that the filters we have, which we replace twice a year actually, we just replaced them this summer, are adequate. Some of the filters that maybe talked about are, you have to make sure that they actually are accommodating to our units also. Some of the filters will overtax the units and they will shut down, but the filters that we have currently are the same that other districts are using. There's some other technology that's coming out. I've heard some ionization, things like that, and it's just out there now. We're just starting to research it. So,
Looking into the fans.
yeah, we will. I mean, they're encouraging open windows as much as possible in classrooms. We're going to purchase additional fans for classrooms to make sure that there's air circulating within some of the areas that are a little warmer within the building. We will look at the air management system here to ensure that, if we have to run the AC a little longer into the school year, we will. We run into a problem with that. We have one room that's really warm and the person next door is cold. So we try to keep that balance all the time. As far as air filtration in, let's say, nursing units or nurse's office, stuff like that, those are completely isolated. So they're not blowing and taking that air and transferring it into a hallway or another classroom. And even the isolation rooms that we've looked at within the building have their own air transferability. So.
Thank you. Okay, we'll come back to the audience. I just want to make sure we get equal vote. If there's anybody over here who had a question, otherwise I'll go back over this way. Yeah.
I'm wondering what recess will look like, if small groups or structured activities, all different the other ones,
What will recess look like? The way you're describing it sounds like elementary recess, right? Okay. Mrs. Mabel, do you want to take this question?
We're not 100% at this point. We haven't made final decisions on that. But what we are looking at is having it be much smaller groups. So it would be the cohort that is in the student's classroom would be the cohort that the student would go out with and have recess with. So it would be that same group of kids. It won't be like I used to have kindergarten and first grade together and second and third grade and fourth and fifth grade. I just can't do that at this point and keep everybody safe. So it will be a much smaller group. Specifics more than that, I'm not there yet, but getting closer. Maybe Tuesday.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. The district has an established history of busing students anywhere within the district boundaries for afternoon drop-offs. Will this continue? How will the district address the new capacity limits of buses while accommodating daily busing changes? Great question. So I talked about how we're achieving capacity on buses. We are asking families that if you have a routine and regular drop-off that's different than your home address, contact your child's main office. We are hoping to be able to accommodate that. What will become challenging because of the way we need to load our buses are the daily last-minute changes that come rolling into the office. So we will be asking our families to try to refrain from that as much as possible.
Certainly, if there's an emergency that comes up, we will work with you. But the resistance truly is because we have to limit the number of students that are on the bus. And if we have a number of requests that come in at the last minute for one particular bus, we don't have the ability to increase capacity on our buses beyond that. I think I got all parts of that question.
I have a question. Okay. How long, earlier you said something about how the students' desk cleaning. I just want to be clear for people who are sending their students to school. How long do you anticipate the student is going to be in the classroom? I'm not sure if the teachers are going to come to them, if you've even decided that yet, but how long do you feel the kids will be sitting at that desk?
How long do we feel a child will be sitting at a desk? That's going to vary. It's going to vary on grade level, it's going to vary on class. Across all grade levels, we've tried to minimize the number of times that kids are transitioning. So that was kind of some of the overall planning that took place in the early stages of planning. At the high school, based on where the master schedule finally lands, there could be a situation, especially in the senior high school levels, where there is greater transition. In the middle school, we have the luxury of the pods, and it's easier for teachers to transition, then it's easier to control for that because of the physical makeup. But there will be a higher degree of transition at the high school level. But anytime that students are changing from one student using a desk, the bell rings, another student comes in, those surfaces will need to be disinfected. Yes?
So this really isn't a question, it's more of a statement for the board and the administrators that are here. And as an educator myself, I found this past spring for the two boys I have at home, it was really difficult in regards to how both of them learn. One did, I think, really well with learning remotely, and the other is a hands-on kid that would much rather be in a physical setting. So, I don't really have a question to follow up with. It's just, how are we looking at those individuals that do much better when they're in the classroom in those physical settings, as opposed to some kids that maybe did really well with the remote learning?
I wish that I could stand here and say that we can make really individual, personalized decisions. My background as an educator is focused to a great extent on how do we individualize education and meet the needs of every single learner, whether it's diverse needs based on activity level or how they approach content, how they learn content. And unfortunately, we are in a position with so many moving parts that we don't have the ability to be that discreet in assigning a particular model over another. We will do our best to meet the needs of learners when they are here in one of these two models to accommodate for those kids who are the movers and shakers, and who are more the hands-on learners. But I don't have an easy answer for that. And I'm not gonna stand here and try to please everybody and say that, of course, we can do that. But that's truly just the reality that we're facing. Kim, yes.
So, well, I'm a teacher, and I do teach science, and the way I've taught science for years and years and years, and even the materials that we get from the company that provides our science program doesn't send enough materials for every individual kid to do the lab. They expect kids to do the lab with a partner or in groups of 4 or 5. We're not allowed to do that this year. So even in class learning is going to be, even for the hands-on kids, it's going to be completely different this year too, because they're going to have to do like labs all alone. We can't share materials at all anymore, or get even that close in school. So it's awful. I mean, even in class, it's not going to be the same as it used to be. It's just not.
Yeah, another question.
What will happen if somebody is tested positive for COVID-19?
What will happen if somebody is testing positive for COVID-19? So assuming that happens, if a child becomes symptomatic while they are in school, in our reopening plan that's on the website, it talks in detail about what those steps will be. But we do have specific steps for identifying that child, and then immediately moving toward isolating that child. When a child is in isolation, there does need to be constant supervision by a registered nurse. So we are looking at a model that will include that supervision. Of course, our nurses have been fitted for significantly greater personal protective equipment of medical grade, than other staff members throughout the building. And then arrangements for containment of that child and transition out of the building and either to the pediatrician or to another medical care provider to confirm a diagnosis. If we do find out, and then we will be in and we have to make that report also to the Department of Health. So then we work in tandem to have that child evaluated, and if that child, until that child receives a definitive diagnosis from a doctor, so that child might go to the doctor and be positive for a strep test. And then the child goes through a course of treatment for strep, is fever-free for the 48 hours, and then is given a medical clearance to return. Then they can return. If the child is found to be positive for COVID-19, then we work in tandem with the Department of Health, and that child cannot return to our building until we get the Department of Health's release to do so. So that supersedes even what a doctor's note would say. So there are very strict guidelines for what we need to do in that case. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was also wondering if there's any possibility that the school recommends use
So, what is kind of those trigger points for if the school needs to close as a result of that, there's a confirmed case of a student or a staff member. There is actually a flow chart that's in that reopening document that shows what those trigger points are, that not only makes provisions for local indications of infection rate, but also within the county. So in that chart, it actually will say that if there is an increased rate in the county, but nothing in DA, what's that trigger point and what is the response? And vice versa. So it's really a matrix that has a various number of decision points, but also how many days it would trigger a closure of our buildings. If our buildings do close, if one of those triggers, are initiated, then we would revert immediately to that complete remote learning platform.
I think you may be wondering about the classroom, the children in that class have to all quarantine. I think that's what you've done.
Okay.
They sounds positive because their classmates all
I'm trying to remember the specifics surrounding that. At that point, we do follow the lead of the Department of Health. If there is a child with a confirmed case in your child's classroom, we will be notifying all the parents in that classroom, most certainly. We're not going to try to, hide behind any diagnoses. If anything, my initial response will be probably to exceed what's recommended, because we have to take all of those, any confirmed case very seriously. But all those details, including, those provisions in that communication is in that reopening plan. Let me get one over here Carrie, you want to add to that?
One thing I want to add to that too is
Yeah.
contact tracing will happen from the department.
Oh, right.
So, we're keeping logs of what students are in what classroom, all that information, any transition times, where they transition to. So if there is a case, Department of Health steps in and takes care of all the contact tracing from there. And of course, we would work in tandem with them.
Right.
According, and notifying parents.
As part of that, if the nurse is sending a child home who has a fever, is there a requirement for that parent to send the doctor the child's been cleared to come back to school, or can the parent get home for 2 days and send?
No, there's a required follow-up. That child needs to be seen by a doctor.
Kelly, can I ask you a question?
Kim, yeah.
So, because we have the DASH program, and kids get swabbed for strep here, I guess my question is, so if the nurse swabs and it says, oh, you're positive for strep, that's probably why you have the fever, is that kid good and can go home, or does she still have to follow protocol, oh, well, maybe you have COVID too, because do you know?
So for several of our families, DASH is that primary care provider. And so to play that out, if a child is ill at school and is seen right here in the DASH clinic,
They can kind of identify what it is.
and they can identify what that is, that child still needs to be home, but if that is the child's doctor, then we follow the same procedures. All right, let me try and get another online one here real quick. A question about mask wearing that I think we already hit. There was another question about if a student returns to in-person classes, can they choose what schedule they're on? Again, it will depend on our load at that time. Is it possible to be substantially asynchronous with online classes as long as each day all the work gets completed? We talked about that we are going to have that repository of lessons available at flexible times. There's additional questions about the remote learning schedule. For an elementary student, will they have an 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. schedule? We talked about that. We'll certainly provide that schedule to mirror a child experience in school, and it will be up to the families to decide, where that schedule fits their personal needs. Another one about busing. This is a good one. Let me hit this one real quick. If my family rides the bus to school, will they still arrive 20 minutes before the day begins, and where will they congregate? No, we cannot congregate and hold children at all this year. So we will be adjusting our bus schedules a bit. We've even talked about adjusting the overall schedule by just something like 10 minutes one way or another to accommodate that, so that kids can come into school and go directly to their classroom or a homeroom space. We've talked about reinstituting homerooms in their first period again to control the number of students and where they are going within the school. So will our kids be able to come in and walk around the hallways and socialize with their friends? I'm sorry, they won't. We will have breakfast available, so we're talking about grab-and-go breakfasts that students can take with them. We'll also be accounting for those students who didn't get the health screening at home, so we'll need to be able to do that, and we'll need adults to supervise that piece. So no, we won't be arriving 20 minutes early. We're going to try to sync those as closely as we can. All right, question Clarence.
Don't have a breakfast thing in the lunch, how's that going?
So Ken is asking how breakfast and lunch is going to work. When students are wearing masks, how we're going to socially distance and so on. So for lunch in particular, at the junior senior high school, we will be staging in the cafeteria. We're talking about swapping out some of those tables potentially for individual desks so that we can ensure clean spaces and social distance in the cafeterias. We are doing more frequent lunches and reducing the number of students in lunch at any one given time so students can sit and remove the masks so they can eat. We will not have an open salad bar. Nothing will be a self-serve anymore. Our cafeteria staff is working hard to either have things individually wrapped or one person pre-preparing a tray and it's handed directly to the child and with socially distanced in the line. But until they're seated in the cafeteria, they will need to have the mask on going through line and so forth. They will not be touching the button or swiping to punch in their numbers. They will all be done by cafeteria staff. In the elementary building, however, in order to reduce kids moving around, lunches, right now we're looking at a model where lunches will be delivered to the classroom. And then we will have custodial staff ready to take care of any trash that results from after lunch and then wipe down those tables again following kids eating at them as we resume instruction. Breakfast, as I mentioned before, we're looking at having like a grab-and-go breakfast for those families who want to access that to be eaten in homerooms. Same thing with a protocol for cleaning after that breakfast. Along those lines, in terms of meal accessibility, we will be continuing as a district to provide meals for our families, even if they are remote only, similar to how meals are being distributed this summer. We're looking at that being a pickup option for our families.
Identified several classes that will be able to attend 100%. And wondering, on a class like the other classes. For example, the senior class, I don't remember the numbers, but you have responded 100%, I think 38 said they wanted to attend. But how much room do you have?
I'm getting closer.
There we are. All right, so the question is, how close really are we? And what's the limit of that capacity? I can't answer that discreetly yet, because we have about half of our students who haven't responded yet or committed to a particular model. It's obvious that we have 100% of our seniors that want to come back who have responded so far. And I understand why. My daughter was a senior in 2020, so I lived that experience as a mom. I wish that at this point I could guarantee you that, or say that, yeah, we're gonna be able to get to that, but we simply won't know until we have 100% response. And do I know what the cutoff is in terms of capacity? It's hard to drill down to a number there as well, because it's gonna depend on the course enrollment and how the master schedule at the high school all will fit together in one giant fluid fashion. Because that will determine, and it will be based on what courses those students still require at each grade level as well, so we can really then look at the capacity within each individual class. So that's about as close as we're able to get, right now. We are talking about the overflow spaces in this building. We are staging our gyms, for example, to have desks in them. We've looked at our technology capacity to have classes happening and being live streamed into a secondary space as an option to expand our capacity. We know we have the technology to be able to do that, and we're looking at to what degree can we reassign teachers to provide, or staff members to provide kind of that TA type supervision in that kind of model.
Splitting the 9th grade class in half, the 10th grade class in half, is that how you're doing it, or all 9th and 10th doing the same days, all 11th and 12th?
So the question is, how are we splitting up those cohorts? Is it half the 9th grade class and half the 10th grade class, or is it all 9th grade on certain days, all 10th grade on certain days? We entered that by family first. So we loaded that first looking at keeping our families together, and then where did we stand? And it really aligns more with splitting classes down the middle, like the 9th grade class being split. So is there a chance that two best friends in 9th grade might be at school on different days? Yeah, there's a chance of that. But that was in an effort to keep families together, so it was not all by grade level.
Was that you guys' decision, or do you think that's what the
So that was based on not only feedback from that first survey in terms of the family need, but when the first information started coming out from state ed, in that there's a 150-page guidance document on reopening that state ed put out. And one of the indications was that we have to take a family first approach, and if we're looking at cohorts, that we need to prioritize with considerations for families. So we did make that decision to start developing cohorts in that manner.
The boards get a little muddy on that when it comes to like, I have a 9th grader taking a lot of 10th grade classes. So.
Yeah, the waters get muddy. They sure do. Yeah, so the question is, do the waters get muddy on that? Because I have a 9th grader that might be taking 10th grade classes. Yeah, that's yet another layer of complexity that we've been facing in putting together the master schedule.
We're still gonna get that opportunity. We're still gonna get that.
And 8th graders are too.
Yes, and so will our 8th graders who are designated to take algebra, for example. So yeah, we also tried to prioritize and preserve, those more advanced classes for our students who were already anticipating receiving those. Thank you, Mrs. Robbins, for confirming that. Let me hit one here, and we have about 15 minutes left to entertain questions. Will Delaware Academy be monitoring outbreaks at the college? Many of our students have parents and relatives that work there. If there's a large outbreak at the college, will DA have plans in place for keeping from spreading it? So I spent about an hour on the phone with the interim provost over at SUNY Delhi the other day, and we were specifically talking about and exchanging one another's plans. The reality is, if there is an outbreak anywhere, we will be notified by both the university or the college and from the Department of Health, so that we can determine what will our protocols need to be here at DA. The contact tracing that Mr. Schultz talked about will also help to inform the degree of risk that is posed for us here at DA, and then we will make decisions in concert on how to move forward and communicate that to our families here. A few other questions on here. Oh, I have a statement that I have to read. Thank you for working so hard to keep our children safe. I appreciate all the hard work being put into this effort. Thank you to whoever wrote that. We are working 24/7 on this. And then the last couple remaining questions, I think that we've hit earlier about how will remote learning be set up, live or recorded. I think that we hit those. There's one here I want to address. At the last board meeting, the idea of eliminating non-core courses was discussed as a way. While we understand that for many families, remote learning is not a feasible option, what's being done to ensure that students can still participate and are not impacted negatively by any reduction in offerings at the high school specifically, what's in jeopardy of being eliminated? Will AP and honors level courses still be offered? It kind of goes along with your question. We did work hard to try to prioritize not only all of our core courses that are required, but also preserving our AP and our honors courses. Mrs. Robbins, can you think of any specific electives that we had to forego to answer this question?
We're just looking at, we really actually are keeping most of our electives too, because graduation requires, you know, the state ed requires 3 electives, and we do still have quite a few seniors that need electives. So it's just, I would say more in the music and arts, and more in general because of the fact that it's going to be difficult to have those, you know, in the same format. So I think we've kept almost everything in the high school.
So to clarify what Mrs. Robbins was saying, one of the first things that we really charged our counselors and our high school principal with was, we need you to look at our seniors and our juniors and see what do those students still need in order to graduate on time. We didn't want to have to be in a situation where anybody's graduation in a timely fashion was put in jeopardy because of the situation that we're in. So we quickly determined what are the courses we're going to need to continue to run, including electives, to ensure that they can stay on schedule. And Mrs. Robbins is saying that we've been pretty successful at ensuring that those students are going to get what they need.
I would say possibly in the sciences, unfortunately. We've had to cut a couple of the electives because we've needed more core science courses, and not AP. We kept the AP Chem, but
can you give an example?
Yes, we had an elective zoology, and we had to cut that this year. We have an elective that's fairly new that a lot of our students probably wouldn't have even known about, called Scrubs Club.
Can you come up here and just repeat that?
Sure.
As much as I can capture and remember.
I would say that probably, now that I'm thinking, our sciences would be where we had to cut some of our electives, unfortunately. Zoology was an elective that would have been in the regular schedule if not for this circumstance. We also had a fairly new, just started last year, called Scrubs Club for people interested in the medical field. That was cut, and that is only because I only have so many science teachers that have the specific certification of biology or chemistry, and they need that in order to graduate. So we had to offer more sections, and then those teachers are teaching, you know, every single period that they can teach of those core subject areas. So without, you know, adding additional science teachers, that was the only way we could do it.
Thank you. I think that we've hit all the questions that were submitted online. Other audience questions? Yep.
First, I got a comment. I know that this doesn't replace any of your workload for faculty, staff, you folks up front. It adds to it. And thank you very much for the time and everything that you put in.
It's the entirety here, and it's our board as well. So, yeah, everybody deserves that kudos. Thank you.
So, the curriculum question I had was answered, and thanks so much, Mrs. Brown. The other question I had was, how many classes, you know, I'm kind of mathematically saying there's probably 10 to 12 kids in a class and socially distant. How many classes in grades would this affect? How many classes do we have in our district that are over 12 kids in a classroom? Yeah, 25%.
In the model that we've developed right now, all of our classes are falling within that 12 in this particular model. And that's with the K through 2 possibly coming every day, and that is with the other classes developed in this cohort. We had nearly.
Full-time, Mrs. Zimmerman, that would be what, at a full-time, if we went, when we were able to go to full-time, how many more additional kids?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
So if we went to a full-time schedule,
Yep.
Monday through Thursday, or, you know, we had to include those other kids back in there, I don't think it would double, would it?
It would not quite double. I would say it would increase it in just a rough estimate based on all the numbers, maybe by 35, 40%. It would come pretty close. Other questions? Yes.
As part of your screening, are you maybe asking the question if anybody traveled to any of the hotspot states, that if they returned in additionally, I guess one of the things that we've done in work by where I work is have people been exposed to people that have been tested or are being tested.
Yeah, there's a standard list of 4 questions. I don't have them right here in front of me, but I bet you if we all collaborate, we can come up with all 4 because they're just issued by the Department of Health. And those are 2 of them. Another one is, you know, do you have a temperature, you know, above 100 degrees? And I think the 4th one just is, have you had any of the following symptoms? So you've got the fever, the symptoms, have you come in contact, and have you traveled out of state? And those are pretty standard. We're also going to standardize those across all the school districts in our region for that screening. Yes?
If they have come in contact or if somebody is being tested, those students be quarantined and that's not covered?
Yeah, so the system will flag that for us. So if anybody gives a response that is contrary to the desired response, then it will flag that for us. If the child is already en route on the bus, for example, we'll be contacting that parent and then having them come to collect their child. But yeah, we'll be flagged immediately, which is why the ability to do that screening so that we can see those results each day will be so important. Yep.
Do you have, the groups, you've got a lot of moving parts, et cetera, that you said a lot of times, and again, you guys do a wonderful job. Do you have a list of the committees that are working on this, and do you feel like you have enough people, since there are some differences between elementary, high school, there's transportation, there's people who are introduced out as well, so that parents, families, that staff, not be updates? And what else do you need from us as a community beyond answering this survey to move forward? Because I think there are more people that would like to participate, again, without not getting the group so big. But I think there's more hands out there and hopefully we can work on some.
First of all, thank you for saying that, because, you know, guys, I've been here for a month and 10 days. Thank you, Beth. Are you counting my days? And so, you know, I am always impressed with the number of people who are saying just that. Please let us know how we can help. The reopening committee that was established prior to my arrival, and while Mr. Schultz was valiantly leading this district, and he did an amazing job, by the way, leading us through this spring and through the summer, and has been a tremendous support to me in my transition. I can't thank Mr. Schultz enough for all of that work and continuing to carry out the weight of a lot of this. So, but he was very careful in developing that committee so that it was truly a cross-section of all the different departments that you had just mentioned. And also representing the different grade levels. And because we're a small community, there are times when one person wore multiple hats on that committee throughout the district. Since then, we have added a few parents, we've added a high school student. And truly at this point, I think that committee is sufficiently robust to continue the work that we need to do. However, what can our community do for us? Guys, jump in. I keep saying trust, patience. Please keep sending us your questions. Come talk to us, when we're at the farmer's market. Some questions that came tonight are things we haven't even thought of yet. Mrs. Mabel was saying to her faculty the other day that I need you guys here to help me think of creative ways to do this. So don't feel that you're bothering us by asking if we've considered something yet. I hope that most of the time the answer will be, yeah, we've talked about that, but sometimes that might not be. So that's really what we're urging and asking for our community, for just that understanding and support, because we truly are working tirelessly at doing this. We have worked really hard and pushed to bring back as many of our students as we can. We are going to continue to look at that. But can anybody else up here think of any other ways that our community can be supporting us?
I would say possibly in the extracurricular realm, because we are trying to figure out ways to keep as many extracurricular activities as we can. We just know we have to do them differently, and we're looking for ideas how to do that.
So I was going to summarize you, go ahead. Were you done?
And so just the creative ideas, because we don't want our students to miss out on these things. And last, spring, we did just kind of not do those things, like prom, things like that. We've got to be more creative this year. And so any input on how to keep it, those types of things that really make, especially, our students' memories in school are really important, so.
So Mrs. Robbins is imploring our community to help us think of creative ways to keep our extracurricular, not only clubs and activities alive, but all of those experiences that make school. Proms, dances, all of those, just the celebrations that are unique to DA. I will tell you that as we enter the school year, we'll be looking to do a lot of that virtually where we can, until we have determined and come up with a solid plan where it's safe to do so. I was talking to Mrs. James today about FFA and about, I fully recognize how awesome FFA is in this community. And that's largely outdoors. And that might be a place where we can continue to engage in activities that align with how we used to do that. So, that's one way that we're looking for creative solutions to try to parallel that student experience for all of our kids. Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a handful of students in high school that come to school because of football, or come to school because of FFA, or are you worried about a dropout number?
Am I worried about a dropout number because school is not going to be the same experience? At the high school level in particular, because kids who have stuck it right through. I'll be honest, I had a parent call to say that, if my senior has told me that they want to drop out if they have to be all online again, and that's very real, and that's, terrible to hear from a parent. So the question is, am I worried about kids dropping out? I worry about that in a regular school year. I worry about that all the time. How can we keep our kids, how we can engage our kids? I'm fully aware that sometimes the one thing that gets a kid up and out of bed and into school in the morning is the threat of, if I don't go to school, my coach isn't gonna let me play in that game tonight. I get it, I totally get it. And so, we are certainly trying to make decisions to avoid putting people in those situations, and to the greatest extent that we can, and still maintain the health and safety of our kids, of course. We're open to ideas for doing that. We have about 2 minutes left. I think Mr. Paterziba is raising his hand that I'm guessing some new questions have come in online.
I added them to your list.
There they are.
Yes. Probably easier for you to read them than for me to read them off here.
Nope, go right ahead. Okay. If a teacher has to quarantine, wouldn't his or her class then also have to quarantine for the 2 weeks? It will depend on the reason for the quarantine and the results from the contact tracing. If there's a teacher who needs to quarantine, obviously our first responsibility and our first, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, my first thought would be for the kids in that class, you know, and for immediately assessing the safety. So, you know, I'm not trying to evade the question, but it truly will depend on the reason that teacher needs to quarantine. If it's because the teacher just traveled from out of state, but there's no other reason to believe that, then that would not trigger a reason for the entire class to need to quarantine. So that would truly depend on the reason. Will water fountains be closed to limit unintentional spread of germs? We do have a solution for that. Mr. Schultz, can you talk about that super quick, because you say it much better than I do?
Oh, yeah, some of the regular old school water fountains will be offline and turned off, but we installed throughout both buildings, in the last couple of years, we've installed the bottle filling stations. We've purchased 3 more this summer, and they've been installed, I think by the end of next week, they will all be in this. So we have this throughout the building. Those will be accessible.
All right, so the answer is that we will be limiting some of those water fountains just to those that have the bottle fillers in them. And the other ones will be, the valves will be turned off so that bubbler is not continuing to work, and signage will be put up.
So, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so question, doing some reading about other area schools, and I know, you know, there's various reopening committees similar to what we have that have weighed all the different options, and learning some schools have figured out a way to go back in person full-time. Can you tell us specific areas that we're running into that are barriers for us to be able to do that as an option?
Let me hit that first, and then I'm going to ask you to address that. So Mr. Haight is talking about other school districts in our region who we're hearing are bringing all of the kids back full time. You know, and I have been on the phone with those superintendents to say, how are you doing it? How are you doing it? And you know, they have either they're much smaller. I know Andy's is bringing everybody back full time because their student population is so much smaller than ours is. They do have the ability to do that. I know that I've spent a lot of time talking to Mr. McDonald in Walton, and some of those creative ideas were what sparked kind of our push to look at our younger learners and how we can bring them back full time. So in communication with other superintendents, we've shared ideas. To the contrary, there are also many districts that have said that the challenges have been insurmountable, and they are switching back to completely remote for everybody out of the gate, whether it's for a month or whether it's indefinitely. But Mrs. Robbins, you seem to want to respond to that too. Please.
Well, Mrs. Zimmerman had tasked us with bringing back 100%. We worked on that data last week, as a matter of fact, and it isn't so much the structure. We've definitely found that out right away. It was our staffing. And so I had teachers that would have to teach 10 and 11 periods a day, which we only have 9. About 50% of our staff would have been well over, just based on, it's so difficult to really see it until you put it all out on the paper, but with all of our content areas and our specific certification requirements, even with the state ed, you know, changing the requirement just temporarily to the 10 hours a week out of your certification, it isn't possible with our current staffing. And the other thing for me is that I don't really agree with the academic excellence that we want to keep at DA is having a staff, you know, a teacher that isn't specialized in that content area. In general, you know, I don't think that's a very wise choice.
Is that with keeping everything we have, or is that with reducing some of the things that we may not have to have?
It was with reducing. I mean, it was with trying to come up with every single caveat that we can find, and also doing live streaming, and we're going to do that with a hybrid model, you know, having someone else in the classroom next door to a classroom. But it's at least as long as the state ed is still going to require the 22 credits and the Regents coursework, and wanting to keep that rigor, science labs, all of that. It just wasn't possible with our current staffing. We have a shared staff anyway in the middle school and the high school in order to make things work, so. And in the elementary, correct.
Is there any one content area that was more challenging or is more challenging that versus another?
Definitely science. It always comes back to science because of the certification areas, but math, our numbers are large. I mean, any of the areas where we have to, get them through those regents in order to graduate. Social studies, that we don't have a lot of extra teachers in each department here.
Julie, were you gonna add?
Yeah, I can add, at the elementary level, in order to bring 100% back, I would have needed 15 new teachers. We don't have 15 new teachers, we just can't do it. I don't even have all the space to bring them all back in my building, so then we even looked at bringing them, bringing some of them down here, that's fine. But I need people to be able to watch this 12, and people to be able to teach this 12, and people to be able, and I just don't physically have the people to do it and to have the cohort small enough that they need to be.
So the extra teachers we have and the extra help teachers that are certified are being used to push into the full-time grades that you're bringing back to make that work, is that?
They are not health, the health teacher is not.
No, not the health teacher,
Okay.
the extra help.
Yes.
AIS?
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, that's where you're pushing.
So that's where you're reconfiguring what teachers are
I
teaching?
haven't done that yet, but yes.
Okay, maybe I said.
Yes.
Okay.
That is a thought.
What happens when a teacher can't come to work? You're gonna have, or multiple teachers can't come to work just due to life appointments. And are substitute teachers gonna be able to deal with this model, or?
I'll let Mrs. Simmer.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about, it's gonna be a whole, I've been a substitute teacher. This is daunting as someone who's been a substitute teacher. I would definitely try for the K through 6.
Yeah, we are concerned about our ability to cover if we have a teacher who needs to quarantine. I had that on a few of the prior slides. And we have received a number of substitute teachers who are willing to come back. And we've heard from retired teachers who want to help out and sub where we can. But we could have a case where a teacher has to quarantine, where it's not even necessarily due to a diagnosis. And then we need to cover that teacher's class for 10 days, and that completely takes one sub out of our pool for 10 days. So that is a concern. We just don't know until we're in and doing it, really what strain that's going to put on our system. So, that's another, we thought about, do we pick up the phone and call all of our subs and say, do you want to come back and teach with us? And again, there's the financial implications associated with that, but also we can't deplete our sub pool. And I will tell you that our subs will be going through the same training that our teachers will go through in terms of our health and safety protocols. Will they be experts of the content in all the areas? No. And that's no different than, even during a typical school year. But that does address that question of subs. I'm going to take one more question because we're a little bit over time.
Does anyone else on the board?
And then I was going to yield the floor to the board for any additional questions or comments, if that's okay. One more question.
It seems that the constricting factor in being able to bring my room back full time is the staff. What are your thoughts about parent volunteers? In the Brothers School in California, they have to volunteer X number of days every month. They don't have classroom aides for the school pays for. Parents have to do it. I think there's a lot of parents in this community that would be willing to and interested in doing that.
I know there are a lot of parents in this community that would say, sign me up to volunteer.
If you're gonna have live stream video into the classroom next door, and the teacher is credentialed, why couldn't volunteer be in that next door classroom, making sure that the kids are paying attention?
So a couple different things. You said if there's a volunteer who's credentialed.
No.
Oh, but if you know anybody like that, we will take them to sub. So please send them our way. But parent volunteers in general, yeah. So Jonah asked a great question. In New York State, even our substitute teachers have to be fingerprinted in New York State and have to go through a security check to be volunteers in our buildings. But within the pandemic, the Department of Health has advised that we restrict even volunteers in our buildings at this time. And so, you know, So Jonah suggests that we pay them $1 so that they're no longer volunteers. I don't think we'd get away with that.
The Department of Labor would then get.
And the Department of Labor would, that's right, absolutely. So, but keep bringing us those creative ideas, truly, because we'll consider every one. And so, you know, Amy, I'm gonna stick around for a little bit if you wanna catch me right out there.
I'm just gonna dovetail that there's no reason why a parent couldn't volunteer for remote learning, push-in, and TA, so that there's one more face on the Brady Bunch screen that's an adult that can assist with questions.
I'm gonna run with that just because you brought that up. And then we're really gonna try to pause at that point. I wanna yield the floor to the board real quick. But you mentioned that, you know, if a parent at home can be volunteering maybe to watch, you know, a group of kids kind of remotely. I will tell you that I think a valid concern of some teachers has been, you know, how do I manage in a remote system or in a remote Google Meet or whatever, if I have parents helping their kids and the parents are interjecting while I'm giving a lesson. And the parents are either correcting their child or correcting other kids in my class or correcting me as a teacher, right? And so what we are going to do is also put some ideas around, and here's a good idea, a good way the community can help us think about this too, is to come up with a school and parent compact. That if we're choosing that remote learning option, and even for our kids who are remote learning and hybrid, what will be our mutual commitments to one another? What can be the mutual expectations for one another in terms of parent participation at home and what our recommendations are? And as a parent, what can you expect from us? The question came up about, you know, if I'm in the evening and I need to talk to a teacher, what do I do? We're gonna look into that and we'll have an answer for that. But that will help to define that a little bit because that just jolted that question, you know, for me, that was a concern, and we need to be responsive to the concerns of our teachers as well, and what position we're putting them in when we're entering all of our students' homes. So on that note, thank you so much for staying as long as you did tonight, for asking really, really great questions. We are truly all in this together. We are here to serve your kids, and we take that responsibility very seriously about the trust you're instilling in us for the well-being and care of your children. I just want to turn the floor over to our board president. If there are any final comments or questions from board members, I want to give you an opportunity for that.
Yeah, I just.
And would you mind just coming up to the mic so our folks at home can hear? Thank you.
Trustee Shepherd.
Well, it's probably a question you're gonna have to answer, Kelly.
Okay.
I guess want clarification on the mandate or the guideline as far as if you wear a mask, like in school, you still have to social distance, like if kids wear masks all day long, can we have 20 kids in the classroom? Or no, the mandate is they have to do both. That's what.
Okay.
I don't know.
I will attempt to answer that as best as I can.
So there's not a 24/7 requirement that it's social distancing and masks. That is a recommendation. And because it's a recommendation and a best practice, we should try to uphold that where we can. The requirement is socially distanced or a mask. So when I say that, we will wear masks to the greatest extent possible throughout the day, whenever we're transitioning, except for when we're seated and socially distanced, because we're also required to provide a mask break. What we can't do is say you can never take off your mask, because we're also required to give those mask breaks. So that's how we are achieving that piece. Now, the question came up from a teacher that if I want to have my kids stand up And maybe at a science lab, can I have two students across a desk from each other within 6 feet wearing masks, where one child is a note taker and the other child is using the lab equipment? Yes, you can do that. That is permissible as long as everyone's wearing masks. But the overall recommendation is where you can and where it's feasible to do so to maintain social distancing with the masks.
This is another one. I think I already know the answer to this, but is the state ed or the governor, I know they have said about the 5% and the 9% like COVID rate or whatever that we have to keep tabs on. Is there any like guidelines or time frame that he's looking at or the state's looking at, that if the southern tier is still like 0.0 or under 1%, that some of these guidelines can start going away? Is there any, in the future, any timelines for anything like that?
I hope so. You know, if you've been following the governor throughout this entire pandemic, we know that you cannot necessarily predict how those are going to lift. Can I stand up here and recite exactly what those trigger points are, as they pertain to the greater community? I can't without going back and looking it up and referring to the chart. But I do know that is something that is always fluid, you know, and changing, and we will follow that recommendation if that changes. So, Beth, I'm going to turn it over to you with any final questions or comments.
No, I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's fantastic to have some turnout to some of these meetings that we have. I would encourage you to, you know, if you have family, friends, you know, have them fill out the survey if they haven't already done so, because it's really important for us to get the most accurate information that we can, so that we can put a successful plan into place. And just next Tuesday, if you know folks that are interested, you know, again, make sure they realize that we are doing this again next Tuesday, and that we have the farmers market times that there'll be folks available too. So just thank you for coming.
I just want to make sure people at home can hear. Sorry, Sean.
As a relatively new board member, and the board volunteered to sit on the reopening committee, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Wilson stated. The level of time and commitment that this administration excuse me, has put into this effort is tremendous. And I just like them to be recognized for all the additional time and effort that's been put into this. And one question that I've been asked that I haven't really heard addressed or contemplated is, how are we going to look back at the time lost in the spring and the level of regression and the additional AIS or revisiting or catching up, or maybe someone could speak to that.
So at the end of last year, with everybody's report cards from the elementary, went home information that we will be doing assessments at the beginning of this year, finding out where those gaps are and working to meet those gaps. That is no different, I'm sure, than what Mrs. Robbins is planning to do at the 6-12 level as well. It's a little bit more difficult just because kids might have taken biology last year and they won't be taking biology this year, they'll take something else. But there may be still those priority standards that everybody needs to have at a certain grade level that will be assessed and looked at. At the beginning of when? At the beginning of the year, but not the very first day. Right. But at the beginning of the year, within that first few weeks.
Trustee Kelly.
What I was thinking about is the music program. Most elementary music programs involve a lot of singing. And then it was mentioned that you have to be 12 feet apart in chorus.
The music department is working on different things that they can do with the kids as far as rhythms and things like that, so that they'll still be able to do that. They'll also be giving them things to do at home so that they can be practicing songs at home because they can sing at home. They just can't sing closer than 12 feet apart here at school.
Another thing I was thinking about for busing, many families already have expanded their bubble to a close neighbor, a first cousin, a second cousin, a person who's almost considered a cousin. Would that affect busing seating on the bus? Because these people have been exposed continually all over the summer already. So that more people could be on that one seat rather than, oh, I'm only this one family.
No. Just because we can't. We're being live streamed. See? I'm teasing. This is the most supportive board that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, truly. So, and we have developed that kind of relationship pretty quick. So we have no way of knowing, who our trusted bubbles are. And I know that as a family, that we have another close family and cousins who we know that we've been safe with throughout the pandemic. But if we tried to manage all of that and honor all of that, it would just become unwieldy. So it's not, we try to control for things the best that we can, and the best way to control for that is our known families and seating them together on the bus. But great question.
What about kids that go to daycare together? Go to daycare after school, same day, all the time?
Well, we'll still deliver them to that daycare if we know that that's where they're going, but we can't put them all together on the bus. So, okay.
Any other questions? There was one last thing. You mentioned that you were going to buy more fans, and that on surface value, or on the surface looks really good. Though I read that they were going against fans because they felt it would spread any COVID virus even more.
One of the things we're looking at is trying to extract hot air out of the classrooms rather than fans blowing in.
And that's what I was thinking, if it was going to be
that way.
Okay, thank you. Seth, do you have anything?
So I think Jonah brought up a good point, and I want to just talk a little bit and maybe go into the idea of capacity a little bit. And I'm wondering, have we surveyed our faculty about additional certifications and willingness to do something outside of what they normally do? Do we have a comprehensive idea of what we have out there? I'm always amazed by our faculty and the things that they're willing to do. And from a few people that I've talked to, actually a number of people I've talked to, most are willing to say, for a period of time, I'll do what it takes, because we know this is going to end, pandemics end. So there's that aspect of capacity. But back to his point, is there a way to assess our community's capacity in it, and more than just we know there's a teacher here or there that would help because they just retired or they're certified or whatever. Is there a way that we can collect that to help relieve some of the issues you're talking about, Robin? So that's part one. So just to make it so you don't have to keep part two. The bus thing, when they're on a bus with a mask, if we can go back to that, how close are they able to be? Was that? I know, but what is that though? Is that 4 feet, 3 feet, 2 feet?
No, there's no feet restriction. We could load kids on a bus if they all had masks.
Okay.
Can I hit this?
Yeah, sure.
So the latest information is, we could theoretically put a bunch of kids on the bus if they all had masks. Just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should, and we are trying to exercise our best judgment really to find that balance between, what is allowable and what is recommended best practice.
Sometimes we err on the side of allowable because it helps us get closer to maximizing our capacity. Other times we err on the side of what is recommended or best practice because we feel as educators that that's really in the best interest of our kids. How can we accurately survey the capacity of our community? I don't have an answer to that. It's a great question because, you know, anytime you're going out with a survey, you've got to have a goal, right? And to understand what kind of information am I hoping to receive back, and then what is my ability to digest, and what do I do with that information? And so I'm immediately, when I think about, we were asked the question, what else can the community do? I'm open to suggestions, but if you're sensing hesitation in my voice, it's because I'm also keenly aware right here of all of the regulations that we still have to follow, even if people volunteer to give up their entire day. You know, specifically, we have heard from teachers. I keep saying to people, I can't believe I've died and gone to heaven with the teaching staff here, because they really are willing to go above and beyond, without a doubt. Again, I don't want to burn out our teachers either. I don't want to take advantage, because we're already asking them to do a huge lift. And we need to be sensitive to not overextending, not having them teach for the full 9 periods, because they do need time within that day to plan. Do our teachers go home and plan well into the night? They do. I'm married to one, so I know. I know they absolutely do. So I haven't thought about, you know, a specific survey asking our community that, because I don't want to get in the position necessarily where the district and the board are putting a survey out to the community, and then communities assuming that we'll be able to use them in the way that comes back. But if you have thoughts surrounding that, I mean, we'll continue to work together. You know, with the support of this board, we've come up with a lot of creative ideas and solutions. And some of what you saw tonight was a direct result of suggestions that, and the degree to which this board has been encouraging and pushing us to stretch and to think more creatively. So, you know, it's not just that we're making these decisions in a bubble or in isolation. This truly kind of is, it is a team effort. What was your first question?
The first one was, do we have an
Yeah.
inventory of the teachers and their additional capacity, capability?
We do.
Beth has offered Steve to teach until 5 o'clock.
Sorry.
I'm not going to repeat that part, because he's probably watching.
Thank you.
So we do have a complete list of all of the certifications of all of the teachers in our district, and we've gone back to that list frequently. And we've looked at what teachers do we have that have dual certifications, with the goal of putting a certified teacher in front of our kids as much as possible. We've looked, because we have to refer to that when we're considering asking a teacher to teach, you know, out of their certification area. So we don't need to pull for that, because we have that information, and we've used that to base a lot of the decisions that we've been talking about, where we've already stretched and reassigned our existing staff.
And Julie and I are going to have our faculty meetings. We're going to actually offer 2 before Wednesday. And I think that we'll have a lot more. We need to get the input of the surveys. 50% isn't high enough to really make those final decisions of maximum capacity. And I mean, we'll do whatever we can do to maximize it as soon as we know for sure how many are going to be truly, you know, remote only. Then we can figure out how many more we can bring back. But
Okay. So that's still in development.
well, that's that
Yes.
50% we need to answer that survey.
So we're going to start with phone calls on Monday from each of our offices to families to try to get that 50% closer to 100. So then we definitely, you know, have a better idea. So, you know, if those remote learning numbers increase, that gives us greater capacity here. But we're not going to encourage people to go remotely, you know, to just, you know, at the cost of being able to bring kids back here. It's still family decisions that we have to respect. So just like we are holding 2 of these public forums tonight and Tuesday night, we also are doing that for our teachers and staff. And so we're doing that as faculty meetings, where I'll be jumping in with each of our principals, again, for open Q&A for our teachers and staff. And we've been doing that already, and it has already surfaced some more ideas and some great conversation.
I'm gonna ask our board president if she has any final comments, because we do need to tie things up for this evening, and thank you again.
Yeah, I do want to remind people, we're doing this again on Tuesday, so, keep the questions coming and the great ideas too. I also want to remind people that the decision that you make in 2 weeks doesn't mean nothing's going to change or evolve here during the school year. So don't feel like I chose remote learning and there's no chance ever that my kid could come back. We don't know what's going to happen in January, we don't know what's going to happen in March, we also don't know what's going to happen at the end of September. So I don't want you to feel like it's a stick in the ground. That's it. The line has been made. This is going to evolve. We're going to run into problems. We're going to run into solutions to those problems. So please don't feel like there's never going to be an opportunity for us to reflect, to change, to hopefully bring kids back. You never know. So I do want to reiterate that as much as possible. I also want to say, as a community, I really appreciate a lot of your positive and inspiring and useful comments. We need useful comments, so please keep them coming. And I do appreciate our board, our administration, our teachers, our staff, everyone. Thank you so much for all that you're doing to make this happen for our students, because of course, that's why we're here. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, and I guess we can wrap this up. So thank you, Luke, please turn us off because